Hi, we are Ellie Cortez, Miranda Griffin, Michaela Hickel, Sky McCullum, and Eleanor Ross, and today we're going to talk about the lack of consent for practicing pelvic examinations. So first we're going to take a look at the background and the context to this issue, which is the lack of consent regarding women's sexual health. So what is the big issue? So the big issue here is that it is common in legal practice in 45 of the 50 states, including North Carolina, for medical students to learn to perform pelvic exams on uninformed, non-consenting women who are under anesthetics for completely unrelated surgery in the name of advancing medical knowledge. So as a group, we would like to address this issue, research the background for this immense problem, and then provide an intervention and solution to permanently stop this unethical practice. To break down the issue of lack of informed consent for these pelvic examinations, we first look back at history. We then looked at how the problem persists and how it plays out in STEM. Our three-part solution to the problem consists of spreading awareness, putting pressure on teaching techniques, and taking legal action. So a little bit behind this issue. Medical students performing pelvic exams for training purposes on anesthetized women without their consent has been going on for decades and is not even unique to the United States. Most of the time, the students are unaware of the lack of consent that preceded the exams. These practices are used with the belief that not enough patients would consent to the students standing in on their examinations. There have been surveys to show that women would be willing to give consent for learning purposes, but some may be uncomfortable with having more than one or two students in the room. That limits the number of students that could gain that learning experience. So why does ending this unethical practice matter so much? There's two main issues that we want to look at here.
Yes. So in our society, in this humanistic and individual model of a person, agency is by definition a feature of each human being. So those who are generally non-constituted as agentic are then by definition within that model not full human. So in order for women to be truly equal and empowered, they have to be able to have control over their own bodies, their own choices, and their own agency. And then also, by allowing medical students to learn these practices on unconsenting and unconscious women, first of all, they're learning that they're being taught that they can objectify female bodies for medical purposes. And then they are additionally failing to learn about the importance of creating a relaxed and open environment when when performing sensitive medical procedures. So, in relation to STEM, due to the male bias that we see in STEM, female perspectives are often not given or valued. So this allows these outdated and sexist practices to continue and not be challenged. We already know that there's a big problem with female representation in medicine, resulting in potential harm of women by drug side effects. And so by increasing the amount of women in STEM, concerns having to do with female health in general are more likely to be brought up and taken seriously and addressed. So this is the result of a gender bias within STEM as well. Looking at a comparable examination for men, such as a prostate exam, scientists have found multiple ways to get around teaching that on an unconscious, unconsenting man, including even building a robotic rectum for students to learn on. And it's also common practice for students to learn on paid professional patients. And some public exams are already taught this way, so it wouldn't be a big step for all teaching hospitals to make this switch. So why is this still happening? When someone doesn't have to think about something, they end up taking it for granted. If you take the example of Michael Kimmel not realizing his privilege of being a white man until college when it was explicitly pointed out to him, you'll see that since most men don't have to deal with this issue, we don't talk about it very much in society, because white men holding positions of power in general leads to more ignorance of issues that impact mainly women and minorities.
So now we're going to look a little bit deeper and analyze why is this topic so important and who does this topic really affect. Does this type of issue sound familiar? Probably because these stories seem to be very closely related to a lot of different medical malpractice that has happened in the past. For example, a study that occurred in 1932 to 1972 of men with syphilis, in which there was, again, appropriation of minority bodies. More specifically, with this case, research with the deadly syphilis disease was experimented on with many African American men, used only for the advancement of medical knowledge with little to no regard for consent. Continuing along the same lines, there seems to just be a history of exclusion in medical research and medical consent when examining Black and female identifying bodies, and also wanting to look at the intersectionality there of Black female bodies. When speaking of people of color and women who are people of color, there seemed to be less consideration of them as sentient beings as compared to male Caucasian bodies. This is not an isolated incident either, but a common theme in the medical community. So looking a little bit deeper, common reactions to this from the medical community is that the practice of performing these unauthorized medical examinations is good for society. This was explained as meaning that allowing medical students to get their practice in now will have positive benefits in the future. This shows a consistent attitude in the medical community of simply not caring about minority populations and overlooking them for the good of society. So how do we solve this issue? We have developed a 3-step plan to cover all bases of this issue. Step 1 is to raise awareness. We need to make sure people are upset and aware about this issue. The second part includes increasing pressure. We want to increase pressure on these teaching hospitals to declare that they will no longer utilize this practice. Third is we want to take legal action against this practice. We want to file it in federal law suits, and we also want to lobby the congressional representatives from our districts. So step 1, we want to raise awareness. So we figured one of the best ways in recent times to raise awareness about issues like this, especially issues that, from our experience, a lot of college-age students really do care about, is through social media. So to bring this immediate change, we can start a social media campaign to raise awareness about this issue. This will also help gather together women who have suffered from this before and will help create a sense of community. Now this is one example of what it might look like for a social media campaign to appear, especially on a college campus. It is really simple nowadays to just post something on your Instagram, Facebook, or Snapchat story like this graphic that will quickly spread awareness to anybody who is looking. It shows it in a very few words, but still gets the message across. And so many people just don't know about this issue happening, and so it's not immediately on their mind. But seeing something as simple as this can take a step towards dismantling the practice and creating public uproar. So step 2 is then pressure. So through the social media, we can gather actually petition signatures. through online petition websites in order to stop this practice. Having these petitions to be able to present to teaching universities can help persuade them to declare that they will no longer utilize this practice. With added pressure, the hospitals will be more likely to completely stop the practice. And then step 3, the most complicated part, is going to be the legal action that we wish to take, which will completely outlaw this practice across the 50 states. So in 5 states, it is already illegal to do unconsenting pelvic exams on women for this reason. So those 5 states are Hawaii, California, Oregon, Illinois, and Virginia. And right now, Massachusetts is also currently trying to pass a similar bill. And while it's still important to lobby state legislatures to pass state laws in regards to this issue, we must now turn our focus to stop this practice nationwide. Because this way, even in states that do not often make women's rights a legislative priority, like North Carolina, we will make sure that their rights are protected too. So we intend to file both a federal lawsuit against teaching hospitals as well as lobby U.S. representatives and senators to introduce this as an issue, this as a bill that would ban the practice nationwide. Okay, so there will be a couple challenges in doing this. There's no state that has a law that specifically and explicitly allows for this practice to occur. There just isn't a law that prevents it. So since there's no state that can be sued in the Supreme Court for the unconstitutionality of this practice, then we have to look in a slightly different way. So instead, we will need to create a federal lawsuit that states that hospitals are violating federal law in order to make our argument apply nationwide. It will be difficult to find a plaintiff for our case because the majority of women subjected to this assault are never actually told that it occurred. So people might be suffering the consequences of it but not realize that it was from this because they don't even know that it happened to them. So part 1 of this will be our federal lawsuit. So we will argue in court based on 2 main statutes or parts of federal law. So the first part of federal law is just the federal definition of rape. So it states that rape is any person subject to this chapter who commits a sexual act upon another person by, and it lists a few reasons, and one of those reasons is first rendering that person unconscious. The Fourth Amendment is the other piece of legislation that we will argue. So the U.S. Constitution's Fourth Amendment states the right of people to be secure in their persons, along with some other stuff, against unreasonable searches. So our plaintiff's attorney will argue that the hospital denied them the right to be secure in their person, and that because the exam was not for the medical benefit of the patient, it was a sexual act performed on them while unconsenting and unconscious. And so the other half of our legal argument here will be going to the U.S. Congress to directly lobby them to present a bill that will federally ban this practice. So we will lobby both the House and the Senate to convince our specific representatives that this issue is something that transcends state borders and has to be addressed by federal bodies. So especially in an election year, a women's rights issue like this one is something that politicians should lead to get behind, as since it will make themselves look good and help their constituents. So this will be in conjunction with our lawsuit happening at the same time. So that concludes our 2 parts of the legal plan. We also just wanted to go through a few other things that can help spread awareness besides social media, and that maybe the social media campaign can lead to. So we can spread awareness on this issue via talking on talk shows, celebrities who can get involved if they are posting on social media or talking about it, influential bodies that represent mass groups and diverse people, so different interest groups, if we can get the ACLU to support our lawsuit, and different groups like that, it would help a lot. Ensure that this issue is highlighted. Agendas of the Women's March, LGBTQ equality march groups, and various intersectional feminist groups. We would love to hold protests outside various well-known hospitals that are known for committing this malicious practice. I think definitely if we can find out if Duke or UNC is consistently doing this, that those campuses would definitely be ones to rally and protest. We also should encourage more women to go to hospitals that are committed to not committing this crime, generating more business for those who are for this cause. In general, be participatory and accountable to the community that this practice is affecting. Acknowledge that micro and macro level outcomes that this change could potentially bring about. And develop critical awareness by exploring, reflecting, and being explicit about these critical issues in the agenda. So lastly, we just wanted to cite our sources and let you know that this is really happening. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you choose to take action against this issue.